Paradika.
Today we're going to do something a little different. We're taking a debate motion that sounds complex and breaking it down as simply as possible. Like the idea is simple. If you truly understand a motion, you should be able to explain it clearly, not with complicated words, but with just a simple logic.
That's right. And after explain it simply, we'll also show you how this motion will actually look in debate round. So, this is not just about understanding the motion, but also understanding how to build arguments from the simple motion.
Okay, so well, here's the motion.
This House believes that developing countries should prioritize economic growth over environmental protection. At its core, this motion asks one question. When resources are limited, what should come first? Improving people's economic condition or protecting the environment?
Well, that sounds simple, but it creates a deep conflict between immediate human needs and long-term sustainability. So, let's break down the both sides of them.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so now government believes economic growth should come first because developing countries face urgent structural problems. Poverty is not just about low income, but it also affects healthcare, education, or nutrition, housing, and social stability. When a country remains poor, every system inside it becomes weaker. It also becomes weaker. So that's why government sees economic growth as the foundation. That's the main problem. That's the most important problem. So, economic growth increases production, expands businesses, and creates employment. Employment increases income. So, income increases purchasing power. So, that means families can afford food, healthcare, and education. At the state level, economic growth also increases tax revenue for the governments. So that allows governments to fund public infrastructure. So roads will be can be improved transportation improves trade, trade improves markets, and stronger markets create more jobs. This creates a cycle of development. Government argues that this cycle cannot happen without prioritizing growth. A major point here is urgency. Environmental damage is serious, but government argues poverty is more immediate because a person suffering from hunger, unemployment, or lack of medical care faces direct harm today, and that harm cannot wait. So, the economic growth addresses those urgent needs. And another important point is capacity. Protecting the environment often requires advanced systems like waste management or renewable energy or green infrastructure or such as clean industrial technology. These things are expensive. So developing countries often lack the financial capacity to invest in them. So government argues that prioritizing growth first builds that capacity. A richer country can afford better environmental protection later. A poorer country often cannot. So the government also argues that without economic growth, social instability could becomes worse. Like unemployment increases crime or weak economies increase inequality and then inequality increases political tension, so this weakens institutions will make environmental protection harder anyway. So from government's perspective, economic growth is not separate from environmental protection. It is what makes environmental protection possible in the future. Like another layer is international fairness. Government may argue that developed countries historically polluted heavily to become rich, now asking poorer countries to slow down, and environmental reasons creates inequality. It means rich countries benefited from harmful development, but poor countries are denied the same opportunity. Government sees this as unfair. So their overall argument is over economic growth is necessary because it solves urgent problems, builds national capacity, and creates the conditions for long-term sustainability. Without growth first, everything else will become harder. Like that.
Okay, well, the opposition agrees that economic growth is important, but they reject the idea that it should come before environmental protection. Their first argument is that environmental damage directly affects an economic stability. This is such an important. Government treats the economy and environment as separate. And the other side, opposition argues they are interconnected. For example, polluted water can affect health. Poor health reduce productivity. Reduced productivity weakness economic output, isn't it? Another example, deforestation increase flooding. Flooding destroys homes, infrastructure, and also business. That creates economic loss. So, environmental damage directly undermines growth itself. And their second argument is long-term cost. Growth that ignores environmental protection often creates hidden future expenses. Some example like pollution increase healthcare costs, climate disasters increase rebuilding costs, loss of biodiversity affects agriculture, resource depletion resource depletion reduce future protection. These costs may outweigh short-term economic gains. Opposition argues that government is focusing too narrowly on immediate benefits while ignoring the accumulated long-term losses. The third argument is irreversibility. Some economic problems can be fixed relatively quick. Jobs can be created, markets can be recovered, but environmental destruction is often much harder to reverse. Forests take decades to regrow. Species extinction is permanent. Climate change affects multiple generations. Means delaying protection creates risk that cannot easily be solved later. Opposition also argues that poor communities suffer the most from environmental harm. They rely heavily on farming, fishing, and natural resources. So, when the environment is damaged, they lost their livelihoods. This means environmental destruction often increases poverty instead of reducing it. That directly changes government's goal. Another important point is sustainable growth. So that opposition doesn't reject growth at all. What they reject is harmful growth. They argue countries can pursue economic development while integrating environmental protection. This creates stronger, longer lasting development, not faster, but more stable. Their model prioritize balance because if growth creates future instability, then it is not a real development. So, opposition's overall argument is economic growth without environmental protection is a short sighted, expensive, and unstable. Real progress requires both sides.
Okay. Alright, so I think we should move. Okay, right? Like, let's continue. Let's move to the actual debate simulation.
Let's go.
Okay, I'll take the government. Okay.
Okay, well, I'll take the opposition side. And in this session, we'll show you how this motion could actually sound in a debate round.
Okay, so let me start from our government side first, from the opening government.
Yes.
The argument is our side firmly believes that developing countries should prioritize economic growth over environmental protection. At the center of this debate is one important reality, like poverty creates immediate suffering. So, millions of people in developing countries lack access to proper food, education, healthcare, and employment. These are urgent problems, and urgency matters. Our first argument is that economic growth directly improves living conditions. When industries expand, jobs are created. When jobs are created, families gain stable income. That income improves access to food, healthcare, and education. This creates upward mobility. It allows people to move out of poverty. And our second argument is state capacity. Economic growth increases tax revenue. That revenue strengthens public institutions and infrastructures. Without sufficient economic service, environmental protection itself becomes unrealistic because green system require money, technology, and investment. Well, then our third argument is sequencing. Like, we are not saying environmental protection does not matter. We're not saying that environmental is unnecessary at all. We are saying it is more effective after economic stability is achieved. A weak economy cannot sustain environmental commitments like a stronger economy can. So, for this reason, growth must come. Thank you.
Okay, now from the opposite sides. Our sides disagree that the government creates a false choice between economic growth and environmental protection. Our position is simple. Economic growth that sacrifices the environment is unstable and more like self-destruction. First, environmental destruction. It is directly harm economic system. Polluted air creates health problem reduce worker productivity. Polluted river also can damage agriculture and fisheries. Other side, there is also a deforestation. It is increasing of flooding, which destroys infrastructure and also business. This harms weaken the very economy government wants to build, isn't it? The second, environmental damage creates a long-term cost. Governments may get short-term profits from industrial expansion, but they will later spend enormous amounts on disaster recovery, healthcare, and also rebuilding the damaged ecosystem. This is what makes their model economically inefficient. The third, some environmental damage is irreversible. Example, a destroyed forest takes decades to recover. Biodiversity loss cannot simply be reversed. Also, climate change creates effects that last across generations. It's a long time to recover. Government assumes these harms can be solved later, but we reject that assumption. So, our sides believe development must be sustainable from the very beginning. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so here's for my rebuttals for opposition's case. The opposition's case ignores the reality of limited resources. They argue for sustainable development as if it is equally affordable for poor countries. But actually, that's unrealistic. Like cleaner technology, environmental regulation, and green infrastructure require significant capital. Like most developing countries simply do not have that. And the second, opposition overstates environmental damage while understating poverty. Like poverty itself kills. Like it creates malnutrition, weak healthcare access, and poor living standards. So these harms are immediate and widespread. And the third, opposition claims environmental damage harms the economy. That may be true in some cases, but without initial industrial growth, there is no economy strong enough to even address those risks. Growth is the prerequisite, not the reward. Like that.
Okay, I take care like the government keeps framing this as if environmental protection is a luxury. It is not. Clean water, clean air, and stability are basic survival needs. Second, government assumes economic growth will automatically reduce poverty. Well, that's not always true. Growth can be unequal. It might benefit corporations and elites, while poor communities remain vulnerable. And if that happens, if those communities also suffer from environmental damage, their situation worsens. The third, government treats environmental damage as a temporary problem. But This time, many consequences are permanent. Once ecosystem collapse, rebuilding them become much harder than preventing damage in the first place. Because when we rebuilding it, we need more than years. We need more than a generation to make it like before. That's why prevention matters. Thank you.
Okay, Eli.
Yes, please.
If sustainable growth is the ideal model, how do poor countries realistically afford expensive green systems while still struggling with basic survival?
Alright, thank you. Well, here, our response is that sustainable growth doesn't always mean expensive technology. Like, it's not always about the expensive things, but it often means regulation, balance, and limiting in excessive exploitation. The cost of prevention is often lower than the cost of repair. My POI is if economic growth causes severe pollution that increase disease and destroy agriculture, how does that improve people's life? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your POI. Let me give the response for that. Because economic growth provides the resources needed to adapt and respond. Without economic growth, countries remain too weak to handle like any crisis or even including environmental ones. That's why capacity must come first. At the end of this debate, our side wins on urgency and feasibility. Urgency because poverty creates immediate harm that cannot wait. Feasibility because economic growth is the most realistic path for developing countries to improve people's life. Opposition offers a balanced model, but balance is difficult when resources are extremely limited. A country must first survive before it can optimize. Growth creates that survival. Growth creates that stability. And only with that stability can environmental protections become meaningful. That's why economic growth must come first.
And from the opposite sides, at the end of this debate, our side wins. Why are we wins? Because we prove that unsustainable growth is an unstable growth. How is it called like that? Because government's model create short-term gains but long-term structural harm. On the other side, also environmental destruction weakens health, agriculture, infrastructure, and also future productivity. That's actually directly harms development itself. We are not rejecting growth at all. We are never rejecting the growth. But what we are rejecting here is a harmful growth. Because in our opinion, what we see about true progress is not measured by how fast you grow, but by whether that growth can last. And growth that destroys the future is not progress at all. And it causes more struggle in the future. That.
Okay, so after hearing both sides, we can see that this motion is really about priorities. Like, not because one side cares about people and the other doesn't, not because one side cares about the environment and the other doesn't. It's not like that. But because they prioritize different things first. Like the government prioritizes the urgency and the opposition prioritize the long-term effect.
That's right. In the government sides, they focus on urgency. Their main idea is developing countries faces immediate problems like poverty, unemployment, and weak healthcare. And also, economic growth is the fastest way to address those problems for them. Like that.
Okay, but meanwhile, the opposition focuses on sustainability. Like their main idea is that if economic growth damages the environment too much, like the long-term consequences can weaken the economy itself. So growth without protection can become unstable like that.
That's very right. And those reason is what makes this motion is strong on the both sides because uh, both sides, the opposition and the government, have the logical ground. The real challenge in debating this motion is proving which priority matters more in immediate human needs or long-term environmental stability.
Yeah, that's why understanding the core clash is so important. Because once you understand the clash, building arguments will become much easier.
Yes, I agree with you. So, that was our attempt to explain this motion as simply as possible, while also we showing how it could actually play out in the real debate, like what we just do earlier.
And hopefully this shows that debate motions may sound complicated at first, but most of them become much easier once you break them down into much simple ideas.
Yeah, that's right. Because actually, in a debate, the goal isn't to be sounds complicated or hard, difficult, but the goal is to be clear, logical, and persuasive, like that.
Yeah, that's right. And if you can like explain something simply, it usually means you understand it well.
Yes, that's right. Well, I think that's all from us. Thank you for watching. Hope this video will help you.
See you in the next one if we might have the next one.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, see you.
bye.